The very last object I wish to speak to you about in this collection of videos is a Python dictionary. Again, it's going to be something that's similar to lists and tuples, but it kind of combines some of the two and has a slightly different purpose. This is something that in particular, if you end up doing anything with data science, dictionaries are going to be incredibly useful to you, so I'd like to introduce them now. The Python syntax for dictionaries is a little bit more complicated than it was for our lists. It begins the same though, with the name of our dictionary over here on the left, an assignment operator, and instead of square brackets like we would see for lists or parentheses like we would see for tuples, we're going to see curly braces for creating a dictionary. However, dictionaries have pairs of things that need to be entered in order to create them, which are keys and values, because that's what makes up a dictionary, our key and value pairs. We have our first key and the value of that key, the second key and the value of that key, and so on and so forth, as many as you need to create your dictionary. And because this syntax is so confusing, I think an example that is very natural is very enlightening. I'm going to go back to my months example, where I want to create a dictionary called days in month that keeps track of my key value pairs. The keys in this example are going to be the names of the month, and the values are going to be the number of days in the month. So you can see that that's what we've done here, is listed the key as a string, which is the month name, use that colon to associate the value of 31 with the key January. And we've done that for all the months in the year. While there are no real restrictions on the values that might appear in a dictionary, the keys need to satisfy some properties. The first property that the keys need to satisfy is that they need to be unique. What we'll show in the next slide is how we're going to access things in the dictionary, and this is why our keys need to be unique. The key is telling us what value to go look up. So if I were to have non-unique keys, for example, maybe I wanted 2 entries in my dictionary, both titled February, but one having a value of 28 and one having a value of 9, my dictionary data type would not allow this, because when I want to access the value for the key February, it would not be sure what to produce as output, 28 or 29. And so for that reason, all of the values that are appearing as keys here must be unique and can never repeat. The second thing, which is part of the reason we needed to talk about immutable data types, is that our keys need to be immutable data types. So they're allowed to be some of those more basic Python data types like integers, floats, or strings, but they can also be tuples, as long as your tuples contain purely immutable items within them. Lists are never allowed as keys within a dictionary precisely because they are mutable. And so that's one of the reasons we really needed to introduce tuples. Now, as alluded to previously, the way that we're going to use a dictionary is again very similar to the way that we would use a list. We can access the values within a dictionary using that square bracket notation. However, the key difference with dictionaries is that we will use keys to access position in the list instead of indices. What I've shown here below in the first line is that if I would like to access the number of days in the month of October, I do that by going to my days in the month dictionary and accessing the key value of October. My computer then goes through my dictionary and finds the key October, and wherever that is in the ordering of that dictionary, what's returned to me is the value that's associated with this key. So it's a little bit more natural to read this instead of something like days in month at 9, where 9 isn't really even the month number of October, but is how the computer is thinking about it internally. Using dictionaries makes our code more readable and seem a little bit more natural. The second point that I have on this slide is that Python dictionaries, like lists, are mutable objects. So for example, let's say I set up my dictionary to originally contain a value of 28 associated with the key of February. If I did some sort of work from within my program and somehow determined that the year that I'm working in is a leap year, and I wanted to change the value that's associated with the key of February, that is allowable for Python dictionaries. I could do the syntax just like we would for a list, but following for dictionaries, where I access the key of February within the dictionary days in the month, and then I reassign a value of 29 to that key. If I then ask Python to print me what is the value associated with days in the month and the key February, it will return to me 29 and will not produce an error the way that it would for tuples. So Python dictionaries are very functional. The reason that we generally use them is when we want to look up two things that are associated, but the way that we would want to look up the value is not according to integers in the first place, second place, third place, fourth place. When there's a more natural collection of keys, very frequently strings, but not always, then dictionaries are a really good way to go. And as I've alluded to, if you do want to go on and look at any kind of data science, learning to work with dictionaries is very useful because a lot of real-world data is going to operate more naturally as a dictionary than it might as a list.